Boris Johnson was a deeply and profoundly inadequate human being and a deeply and profoundly inadequate Prime Minister. To be said for Liz Truss, at least she had a plan.
Now, she only lasted 49 days in office. But was Liz Truss a better Prime Minister than Boris Johnson? The political biographer Sir Anthony Seldon argues that she was. Sir Anthony's new book, Truss at 10, How Not to Be a Prime Minister, is serialised in the Times starting today. And he joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
So some people may be surprised that you've reached this conclusion. Just explain to us why you have.
Well, I mean, she was, we're talking about bad and very bad, aren't we? So, I mean, these are just shades of blackness. And when things are that murky, it's pretty hard to make anything out that has any sense or clarity at all. But look, I mean, Liz Truss failed abysmally and did damage to the economy, damage to the standing of the country, damage to individuals and their savings and mortgages. And she, of course, did damage to the Conservative Party. But Boris Johnson, she didn't do the enduring damage to the British state in the sense of public service and Britain's credibility that Boris Johnson did. Boris Johnson was a deeply and profoundly inadequate human being and a deeply and profoundly inadequate Prime Minister. To be said for Liz Truss, at least she had a plan. The plan was coherent. It was about growth that the country needed. She had some good ideas for doing it. It's just she went about it in a totally wrong way. She claimed that she loved Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, but she studied, had she ever read Charles Moore's book on Margaret Thatcher, or understood that Margaret Thatcher took 2 years before unveiling her own particular policies. A Prime Minister has to read the room, and she had no ability to do that.
So in a sense, you're saying that Liz Truss's mistakes at least came from, if you like, a good place. She had an ideology, she had good intentions, but maybe the execution was wrong, whereas Boris Johnson, didn't have good intentions?
Boris Johnson had no intentions at all. I mean, Boris Johnson, well, he had one intention, which was his own enjoyment of life. To him, it was just all a big jolly jape. And Brexit, well, let's think what's in my interest, not what's in the country's interest. Levelling up, now that's a darn good wheeze. Let's go for levelling up, no matter that it's been British government policy for 90 years. Let's try and make it my own. Got no idea how to do it. He had no idea how to do anything. He was no moral seriousness. There was no ability to work hard. There was no understanding of the job. I mean, he claimed to be a historian, but he had no understanding of what the job of Prime Minister was. So, yeah, I think you've got that. I think you summed that up right. At least Liz Truss, was she was serious about doing what she tried to do. Went about it totally the wrong way. Didn't listen to people. But at least she had. I mean, growth is what the British economy has needed ever since the global financial crisis, and. But you have to listen to people. You can't imagine, as Liz Truss did, that the whole world's out against you. IMF bad, Bank of England bad, Treasury bad, Civil Service bad, BBC bad. Everyone else is bad apart from her, and you can't. That was not how Thatcher operated.
I've been absolutely fascinated reading the piece in the Times today from your book, which is being serialised in the magazine. I know you spoke to over 100 people who worked with Liz Truss closely in writing this book, and some fascinating insights into, well, how she operated in the run-up to her winning the leadership, and then when she was Prime Minister. Just give us some of the insights that you became aware of from these people.
So she was fixated on the idea of just this one big idea, growth. And she'd been consistent about, ever since she became an MP, about seeing the importance of free market driven growth. But she only wanted to listen to people of like minded spirit, a lot of whom were wanting things from her. They wanted to be Chancellor of the Exchequer, or they wanted to be in the cabinet, or they wanted to be advisors. So they were telling her what she wanted to hear. And those people, including a lot of free marketeers who were saying, hang on, you can't do it that way, she would distance. She would demonize as the blob and worse anyone who had anything different to say. But look, I mean, she had this extraordinary relationship with Boris Johnson. They didn't like each other very much. It was just a marriage of convenience between them. They both needed each other. Boris Johnson, because they both loathed, detested Rishi Sunak, gave Liz Truss his backing and his supporters backing that helped to make her Prime Minister. He sustained her in power, although ideologically they were poles apart. And then when Boris Johnson had a sniff in his nostrils that he might actually be able to come back, he and his acolytes abandoned her. So in a way, she was the creature of Boris Johnson. They had this extraordinary symbiotic relationship. You know, the whole book is a lesson. It's an object lesson, a textbook on how not to be Prime Minister. Only one in some 4 million Britons in the last 300 years have become Prime Minister, only 58 altogether. It's an extraordinarily serious job, and if one wants a casebook study on how not to be Prime Minister, that's what the book is, divided up into the 10 things, the 10 strategies that a Prime Minister has to deploy, and one by one, systematically, you can give her credit for being systematic, she broke them. So never again. Britain is in the state it is in today significantly because of Liz Truss and Boris Johnson.
One thing I want to ask you before I let you go, which just astounded me in the piece which is in the Times magazine today. Well, I mean, you talk about how the fact that she enjoyed and often did humiliate her team in front of others in kind of dressing them down. She didn't consult people. But what was really incredible to me was the role that Jacob Rees-Mogg was playing in the early days. He had his eye on the role of Chancellor and, in fact, wanted to go a lot further than Liz Truss did.
Well, he did, and came up with all kinds of completely balmy, idiotic ideas. Jacob Rees-Mogg, I think, doesn't have a lot of self-awareness or understanding of his own limitations or how other people see him. He really did. He wasn't the only one who imagined, and she was quite clever at this. She always was going to appoint Kwasi Kwarteng, partly because she knew that she could always manipulate Kwasi Kwarteng. They'd known each other for many years. There was no way she was going to let Rees-Mogg, and bit by bit, when she realised that this man had pretensions on being the Chancellor of the Exchequer, she distanced him and indeed others who were after the same job. But she was egged on. But look, no one else takes the blame for the appalling mini budget. I mean, Kwasi Kwarteng to some extent, but he was very much completely in her under her spell. It was her. She was doing it. She was driving it on, the speed, the haste. and she simply wasn't willing to listen to the advisors who indeed she humiliated, distanced. She enjoyed humiliating people. She could be sensitive at times, remarkable mother, but to those people around her, there's very little love. And that's always a big test for a Prime Minister, I think, after they step down. Do those people who worked with them want to keep close and friendly to them, or would they sooner just never see them again? And for almost everyone who worked with Boris Johnson, and not everyone, but almost everybody, and Liz Truss, frankly, they never want to see them again.